You think you know what it means to witness something impossible, something that should be locked away in silence, behind a veil no one is meant to lift. But right now, right here, you're not just a spectator. You're the one holding the cracked, half-burnt key to a secret nobody wanted you to find. There's a file, not on any computer, not on any hidden drive, but burned into memory, etched in the spaces between a father's frantic prayers and the whispered voice of a boy. Nobody noticed until it was too late. And this secret, this unbearable weight of a truth has chosen you. You alone are seeing it unfold, like a shadow sliding across the walls of a life you thought you understood, until the moment it breaks apart. It began in a way that defies all logic, yet it feels like you've been standing at the edge of this story your whole life without realizing it. Picture the afternoon sun bleeding through the heavy curtains of a grand, cold house perched on one of the wealthiest streets in Chicago, the kind of place that smells of expensive wood polish and whispered regrets, where every room holds a memory, carefully tucked beneath the silence. Inside, Jonathan Miller, a man whose name is printed in the fine letters of business magazines and whose face smiles from billboards, sat frozen, the color draining from his complexion. His breath was caught somewhere between a gasp and a prayer. His daughter, little Emma, had just turned 2, and for a year she had not taken a single step. Doctors had given up. Specialists had pronounced it a mystery wrapped in hopelessness. And yet, something or someone was about to shatter all those verdicts. The room was nearly empty, save for the soft hum of a ceiling fan and the distant murmur of traffic. Jonathan's gaze was fixed on the doorway, where a figure had appeared with such suddenness that the air itself seemed to shudder. A boy, no older than 12, dressed in threadbare clothes, skin dark as night and eyes too sharp for a child, who lived on the streets. He had been begging nearby, just another shadow in the city's relentless hum. But now, standing in the threshold, he looked like something out of a forgotten dream. His voice, barely more than a whisper yet carrying an impossible certainty, cut through the silence. "Sir, I can help your daughter walk." The words hung there, suspended in the air like a spell nobody dared to speak aloud. Jonathan's mind raced. How could this boy, this black beggar, unknown and unseen, possibly offer a cure that all the world's doctors could not? The room held its breath, and so did you, watching through a crack in the fabric of reality, feeling the first prickling of dread and wonder deep in your bones. But it wasn't just the words. It was the way the boy's eyes held Jonathan's, steady, unwavering, as if he knew things no one else did, as if he had been waiting for this moment longer than any of them had lived. Then, the boy stepped forward, and the air shifted. The fan slowed. The light in the room dimmed, like the house itself was holding its breath. Jonathan's hand trembled as he reached out, drawn by something he couldn't explain. And as their fingers brushed, the boy leaned in and whispered a name, softly, deliberately, one that nobody in that house had ever spoken before. You hear it too, even if no one else does. It's a name buried in family history, a name erased from records and conversations, locked away because it carried a curse no one dared acknowledge. And as the boy's whisper slips into the silence, the impossible happens. Jonathan blinks, and suddenly the boy is gone. Just vanished, like a shadow swallowed by darkness. No footsteps, no sound, nothing but a lingering chill, and the echo of that forbidden name. Jonathan stares at the empty doorway, his heart hammering in his chest. Emma, his daughter, turns her head toward the door, and then, something unthinkable, she speaks. Not baby babble, but clear, urgent, her voice trembling as she says the name the boy whispered. The same name. It rolls off her tongue with a power that defies reason and breaks the fragile calm of the room. The room feels impossibly small now, as if the walls themselves are closing in, trying to trap this moment before it can unravel the entire world Jonathan thought he controlled. You are left with the echo of that voice, that name, ringing in your ears as the scene freezes. Jonathan's face, a mask of disbelief and dawning terror, and the tiny hand of his daughter reaching out toward the empty space where the boy vanished. And you realize you've stepped into a story where nothing is, as it seems, where the lines between the seen and unseen blur, and the truth hides just beneath the surface, daring you to look closer, to understand. But what if looking closer means losing everything you thought you knew? What if that whisper, that vanished boy, that name, they aren't just pieces of a strange story, but keys to something older, darker, and far more dangerous than any of them could have imagined? And most of all, what if the next step isn't about helping a child walk, but about awakening something that was never meant to be disturbed? You're holding the key now. Will you turn it? Jonathan sat frozen in the silence that swallowed the room, the ghost of that whispered name reverberating in his mind like a pulse he couldn't quiet. But just as the seconds stretched into an unbearable eternity, a strange crackle began to fill the space. Soft at first, like a broken radio catching fragments of a forgotten broadcast, then growing louder until the steady hum of the ceiling fan was drowned beneath it. The lights flickered, once, twice, and for a breath the world seemed to teeter, poised on the edge of something unspoken, something that slipped just beyond the grasp of logic. And then the room was empty. Not just of the boy, not just of the whispered name, but of memory itself. Jonathan blinked, slow and deliberate, his mind straining against a thick fog that wasn't there moments before. He looked down at Emma, who was quietly sucking on her thumb, her eyes clear but distant, like she was watching a scene Jonathan could not see. The whispered name, the vanished boy, the impossible moment. They felt suddenly like a dream dissolving at dawn. Was it real, or had the night dragged him into a deeper shadow he had not yet faced? The air felt too still, the silence too complete. The creeping doubt seeped into his skin and whispered lies. Maybe he had imagined it all. Maybe the doctors were right. Maybe it was just exhaustion, or grief, or some fracture in a mind too frayed to hold on to what was true. But if it was just his mind playing tricks, why was there a faint crackle coming from the old baby monitor resting on the windowsill? Jonathan reached out and grabbed it, pressing the worn button, and what came through made his blood turn cold. Not the static he expected, but a voice, faint, fractured, and unmistakable. The boy's voice, saying the name again. Lower this time, broken as if coming from a place too far away or too close to be trusted. Jonathan's breath caught. He slammed the monitor down, but the silence didn't return. Instead, a slow dread began to twist inside him. A feeling he knew well, the kind of fear that didn't shout but settled into the bones, the kind that gnawed at sanity. His eyes darted to the hallway mirror, and he caught a glimpse. Not quite a shadow, not quite a shape, moving just out of reach of sight. He shook his head, willing himself not to slip into panic, but the house creaked in a way it never had. Before, the sound too deliberate, too knowing. Then came the knock, soft, tentative. From the front door, Jonathan froze again, heart pounding with a primal urge to run and a stranger impulse to open it. When he did, standing there was a woman he thought he recognized, though every detail about her seemed off. Her smile too tight, her eyes too wide, and the way she clutched a folder against her chest like it contained all the answers he was desperate not to find. She introduced herself as Clara, a social worker, though the name meant nothing to him, and yet felt like a flicker of something lost. She spoke in riddles, carefully weaving around questions Jonathan couldn't place, dropping phrases like real unsolved mystery, the truth behind what no one tells you, and what they don't want you to remember. But Jonathan wasn't sure if she was here to help or to unsettle. Her words twisted in his head long after she left, leaving a residue of doubt so thick he wasn't sure what was memory and what was manipulation. He tried to piece together what he remembered, his daughter's name, the vanished boy, the whispered name, but the edges blurred, slipping through his grasp like smoke. Audio glitches on the baby monitor, footage missing from the security, cameras, whole moments from the past month he couldn't recall. It was as if reality itself was peeling away, revealing something terrifying beneath. a truth too fragile to hold and too dangerous to face. And then, in the quiet of his fractured mind, he heard the faintest echo of a laugh. Not his own, not his daughter's. A laugh low and knowing, from somewhere just beyond the reach of understanding. Jonathan wanted to scream, to run, but the voice pulled him deeper into the shadows. Was it madness, or something darker? Was Emma truly silent, because of a curse, or was Jonathan the one trapped, prisoner of a reality that no longer made sense? You're left with the same question, staring into the void with Jonathan. What if the story you think you've uncovered isn't a story at all? What if it's a warning, and the deeper you look, the more you risk losing the very thing you came here to save? The lines between fear, faith, and fractured memory blur until nothing feels safe. And in that space, the truth waits, waiting for you to decide, will you dare to remember, or will you let the silence take you too? Jonathan's fingers trembled as he sat in the dim light of his study. A yellowed envelope spread open before him, like a fragile bridge to a past he thought had been buried forever. For the first time since that impossible afternoon, hope flickered with a fragile warmth inside his chest. The documents, forgotten medical records, old police reports, even a grainy photo of a little girl who looked eerily like Emma, seemed to stitch together a story he could almost understand. It was a story of loss and silence, of secrets kept behind locked doors and whispered in shadows. The record spoke of a tragedy from decades ago, a child named Lily who had vanished under circumstances that mirrored his daughter's condition. There was even a note scrawled in shaky handwriting that hinted at some experiment, some intervention that went wrong. It felt like the hidden truth finally unspooling, a mystery uncovered at last. Jonathan's pulse steadied as he read through, the faded pages, each word a balm to the ache of uncertainty. Maybe this was it, the key to why Emma had stopped walking, why that boy had come, why the house seemed to hold its breath every time the name was spoken. Maybe the answers were here, in this forgotten history, in the cracks between truth and silence. He imagined a resolution, a path forward illuminated by clarity. You feel it too. That moment when everything seems poised to snap into place, when the pieces you've been fumbling with for so long suddenly align. That warm, dangerous feeling that maybe, just maybe, you're not crazy. They lied to you. But, as the night stretched on, that fragile hope began to fray. There was a detail so subtle, so small it almost slipped past, etched into the margins of an old report, a timestamp that made no sense, a name that didn't fit. It was a glitch in the memory of this story, a flicker in the frame of what he thought was real. It was the kind of detail that makes your skin crawl, like the echo of a forgotten nightmare clawing its way back into the light. Suddenly, the neat narrative unraveled. The date on the document contradicted everything Jonathan knew. The photo was doctored, and the note, that shaky scrawl that promised salvation, was a deliberate lie. His breath hitched as the room seemed to close in again, the shadows stretching longer, thicker, suffocating in their quiet intensity. The past wasn't a distant place to be understood. It was a mirror, reflecting something far darker and more intimate than he could bear. A pattern repeating itself, with him trapped at the center. The house creaked, low and slow, like the steady pulse of a beast waiting patiently beneath the floorboards. Jonathan's eyes darted toward the hallway, where the faintest whisper stirred. A presence that had been watching all along, silent, patient, and more terrifying for its invisibility. This presence wasn't something you could outrun or reason with. It was in the air, Jonathan breathed, in the hesitant way his daughter looked at the empty corners of the room, in the sudden glitch on the baby monitor that twisted the static into something almost like a warning. It was a force that fed on the fractures in memory, the hesitation in truth, the space between what is said and what is withheld. It was watching, waiting, and it didn't want to be found. Jonathan closed the envelope with a shudder, the weight of what he thought was a breakthrough now heavier than ever. And then, from somewhere deep inside that dark, uncharted space of his mind, a single, unbearable realization dawned. The whispered name, the boys vanishing, the echo in the monitor, they weren't the beginning. They were a symptom of something far older, far more pervasive, a secret so well hidden, so expertly erased, that every step Jonathan had taken was on a path laid out long before he was born. You have to go back to the start, back to the first moment you thought you saw the truth, because now you know. Nothing here is what it seems, and every memory you've trusted might be a carefully planted lie. Look again. Listen closer. The story doesn't just invite a second look, it demands it. Because the real danger has never been the missing steps, the vanished boy or the whispered names. The real danger has been waiting in the silence, in the cracks where your mind tries to make sense of what it's seen, and it's already inside. You weren't alone. That much was clear, though the truth of it crawled into Jonathan's mind, slowly, like a shadow spreading beneath the surface of consciousness, unseen yet impossible to ignore. Others had felt it too, the sharp, invisible thread tugging at memory, the silent pulse behind every vanished moment and whispered name. They didn't speak openly. They couldn't. Not when every word risked unraveling the fragile mask that held this shared nightmare together. But in quiet corners of the internet, in encrypted forums buried beneath layers of code, the scattered fragments of their experience surfaced, cryptic messages, strange symbols carved into walls, and shared dreams that felt less like imagination and more like warnings. You feel it too, don't you? The creeping certainty that you're not just watching a story unfold, but being pulled inside it, woven into a tapestry of things too dark, too secret for the daylight. Jonathan found himself drawn into this hidden network, not by choice but by necessity, as if an unseen force nudged him toward the truth others had pieced together long before. Among the messages that appeared on his phone, untraceable texts, filled with strange glyphs and warnings, one phrase stuck like a splinter beneath his skin. You were right all along. It was an acknowledgement, a thread of hope buried in the thick fog of uncertainty. Alongside it came references to found footage from 20 years ago, grainy videos unearthed from government archives that no one was supposed to see, recordings that spoke in the language of silence and shadows, hinting at experiments, disappearances, and cover-ups layered so deep they had become legend. The government never released this information, and yet here it was, leaking through cracks that could no longer be sealed. And just as Jonathan's reality began to fracture, a new perspective emerged, a voice unlike the others, raw and unfiltered, almost unbearably human. She called herself Marianne, a watcher on the edge of the storm who claimed to have seen it all before, who lived in the spaces between certainty and madness. Her words arrived in fragments, sometimes in dreams Jonathan couldn't shake, sometimes in messages so urgent they felt like a lifeline thrown from the abyss. They watch through the veil, she warned. The ones who twist memory and bend time, the ones who don't just take your steps but your very self. Marianne spoke of identity as a fragile illusion, a construct easily shattered by forces that seeped into the mind like poison, erasing who you were and rewriting the story you thought was yours. As Jonathan listened, the walls of his understanding crumbled further. The voices, the vanished boy, the whispered names, they were pieces of a puzzle controlled by something bigger, something ancient and malevolent, but disturbingly intimate. It wasn't just about Emma walking again, or a secret buried in a forgotten past. It was about who they were beneath the surface, about memory's slippery grip, about control wielded in ways no one dared admit. And the more Jonathan tried to hold on to himself, the more he questioned if he was still himself at all, or just a ghost trapped in a story scripted by unseen hands. You feel it too, don't you? The cold realization that this isn't just a story, told to you but a trap you've stepped into, where every question leads deeper into a maze with no exit. The symbols you've glimpsed, the messages that flicker on the edges of your vision, they are not random. They are calls, invitations, and warnings wrapped in riddles meant only for those who dare to see. The Watchers are here, and they have been since the beginning, silent, patient, and always just beyond the light. They don't want you to understand, but they want you to know you're being watched. You're a part of this now, whether you like it or not. And as the night closes in and the screen flickers once again, one question remains, louder and sharper than all the rest. If memory can be altered, if identity can be stolen, and if the truth has been hidden beneath layers of lies, then who is really telling the story? Who can you trust when every face in the mirror might be a mask, and every memory a carefully planted illusion? The answer waits in the shadows, just beyond reach. But be warned, the deeper you go, the harder it is to come back. Jonathan stood in the quiet room, the weight of all he'd uncovered pressing down on him like a tide pulling him beneath the surface. It wasn't the mystery of what had happened to Emma, or the vanished boy, or the whispered names that haunted him anymore. It was why. Why had all this been allowed to unfold? Why had the fractures in memory, the unseen watchers, the impossible events converged on him, on his family? The answers weren't buried in reports or secret messages. They were buried inside himself, in the fragile, aching core of what it meant to be human. He thought about the moments he'd tried to hold on to, Emma's eyes searching for something just beyond sight, the vanished boy's whisper breaking the silence, Marianne's warning seeping through the cracks of his sanity. Each one was a reflection of a deeper truth, the unbearable vulnerability of being alive, the terrifying realization that the self is not fixed but fluid, shaped by memories that can betray or save us. Jonathan's voice caught as he whispered. To the empty room, a confession meant only for himself. Maybe I've been running from the part of me that's already lost. Or maybe that's the part I need to find. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the fragile hope that in this darkness there might still be light. The choice lay before him, jagged and real, to embrace the truth with all its pain and uncertainty, risking the shattering of everything he thought he knew, or to turn away, to cling to the illusion of safety, and forget what had been uncovered. The very thought of surrendering that choice felt like a betrayal, but the fear of what the truth might do, how it might unravel his identity or save what remained of his soul, was overwhelming. This wasn't just a story about disappearance or memory glitches anymore. It was a terrifying awakening, a call to look at the fragile human heart beneath the surface of every mystery, to understand that some truths don't just change the past, they redefine what it means to be alive, to be seen, to be remembered. And in that moment, as Jonathan breathed deeply, the room seemed to pulse with an almost sentient presence, waiting, watching, inviting him to step beyond fear into something new, or to disappear into the silence forever. The screen fades slowly, to black, the only sound the faint echo of a voice, whispering not from the past but from within. We are all shadows searching for light in a world that would rather forget. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.